just get it out there. We'll make sure that the planning office takes these ideas and runs with it. And so what we have here is just that sign up sheet, name, phone number, and then entity that you're with. And a couple weeks ago, I sent out the email invite that included the Zoom link. So we might have some people joining us on Zoom pretty quick here. It looks like we might have a few joining us. And so that way we can actually take comments from those people as well. And we just want to be able to reach out and reach out and touch as many people as we can. So um, I think there's a lot of good things that we're already doing as districts, as far as like education and really getting out there and trying to make people more aware that water conservation is pretty important. And so I do appreciate some of the plans that were already submitted from Weber Basin, some of the things that they're doing to implement some water conservation, some of the things that other districts are doing that are in line with, state law and state requirements. Those are much appreciated. So we really like to take in that information and use it for some of the work we're doing here at the Weber County Planning Office. And so, yeah, we're always welcome if you happen to come across something that you find is interesting or maybe that you haven't yet to share with the planning office. Feel free to email it over. And if you want to reach out directly to the planning office, they can direct you to my email or my phone, my office. And so this is actually the county building. We hold plenty of public meetings in this building. And so the planning office is just one floor up on the second floor. And so this is pretty familiar space for, I think, a lot of folks, especially the planning commissioners that have been serving for quite some time. And so we do have some it looks like some new faces and some familiar faces. And maybe we can just do a quick intro for those who are just brand new to this meeting today. Maybe just a quick name and what entity you're with. So it looks like I think a lot of these guys, but I haven't seen Jeff Hales yet. So what entity are you with, Jeff?
I'm with Mountain View Irrigation.
Okay, great.
Ward Irrigation.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, Jeff. And let's see, and you, ma'am?
I'm Candy Harriet. I'm also with Mountain View Irrigation and landowner in Western.
Great.
Darren Maurer with Marriott's.
Okay, great. Welcome, guys. Great.
Yeah, well, there's some river commission.
Oh, yes, I am seeing you last time. Welcome to everybody. Okay, great. So what I'll do is probably just work through some slides. And but before I get going on some slides, I just wanted to maybe quick orders of business. A few weeks ago, I also sent out a survey, and first time creating a survey. I hope I did it right. I noticed that I did get a response from Taylor West Weber Water from Ryan, so I do appreciate that. Just a chance for the planning office to collect some numbers, some of the data we can use as far as how many people are served by the district, how many acre feet for different uses of water, things like that. So if you have a minute, take a look at that survey I sent around. And if you have any issues, please reach out so I can get those survey issues, or maybe my questions aren't phrased correctly, but I can make any corrections needed. And so that way we can gather that data for our research. And so here's my slideshow, and I'm just going to go on to a couple slides for discussion topics. I think a lot of these things we've already touched on, but I think if there's something else on that list that really catches your eye, something that you think you have some pretty good ideas, or maybe you want to voice some of your opinions, that's also great too. So current action and policies to conserve water. So this is something that we sent out from the beginning. I think a lot of the districts that if they do have policies in place, go ahead and send them over to us. We can look at them. Any recommended actions or policies and goals to conserve water. Any recommendations that you might have not only for the planning office to put into our code, but also maybe things you can share with other water entities that ways that they might be able to improve. Current demand and water demand outlook, and that number 3 is really related to that survey that I sent around. And so that's just a chance for us to collect that data. Timelines for any action items. So if the district has any goals or action items in place, we'd also like to see not only what type of goals are in place, but what's the timeline to meeting those actions. Line of communication and cooperation, and this is something that just us here getting together as a body and also sharing information, sharing numbers and ideas, emails, things like that. That's a way for us to collaborate with each other, not only even well after these committee meetings end. I think we can still continue to reach out and voice some ideas and get some information. So that's always a good opportunity. The cooperation with irrigation and canal companies for the protection and integrity of the irrigation canal company's delivery system. So, I mean, just working with developers, sometimes they come up with excuses, reasons, maybe complaints, maybe there's some aging infrastructure in place that they feel that needs to be upgraded, or maybe there's a way that we can pinpoint where this infrastructure, maybe areas that infrastructure could be improved. And so the county planning office is a great resource for these water entities to not only pinpoint where these issues lie, but also seek out funding to make some improvements to these aging facilities and systems. And so also number 7, I don't know if you guys are aware, but the county also employs a pretty knowledgeable GIS department, and GIS is really just online mapping. And so if there's maybe at your water entity you don't really have that capability to map some of these things, the county GIS department is there as a resource for you as well. And so and then going on to number 8, which I've already touched on. And so going on to the next slide here. So these are also key discussion topics that we can cover, but these are specifically related to things that in the general plan. And so what I did is I made some comparisons between what we have in the Western Weaver general plan and also what is written into the Senate bill. And I found that there are some deficiencies, maybe some ways that we can improve some of our actions in the general plan. And some of these topics, if you have any ideas, we'd be happy to take, any ideas for this. So if let's see here, maybe we can just start with that first one. So review of county ordinance for conservation recommendations. And so I believe it was the first time we met, we looked at the water conservation code that we have. And I'll go to that in my next slide. And so it's pretty short and sweet, but I think we had a chance to look at this pretty closely. But I also wanted to point out that in county code, we do have chapter 108 for design review. So a design review actually helps that when a commercial entity or something other than residential wants to come in and operate in Weber County, the planning office has an opportunity to look at their operation and make sure that they are going to comply with water conservation, water-wise standards. And so that's a chance for us to look at commercial operations. And then going on to 108.2, architectural, landscape, and screening standards. That's also a means for us to look at water conservation standards. And it actually has in that portion of code, it has limitations on how much turf grass, how much area needs to be landscaped, the type of irrigation that should be done, as far as drip and being on a separate system from the rest of the and then also conditional use review, very similar, another opportunity to regulate the commercial side, industrial side of development. And then as far as that last one, development agreements and rezones, that really comes into play with, if, if a, if a landowner or a developer is looking to do a residential subdivision, maybe even commercial, we have that developer enter into development agreement. And the development agreement is something that holds that developer to specific requirements, something that may not be included in code. It may not be even be part of any law, but it's agreement between the county and the developer that specifically says, here's what you're gonna do, developer. And that's an opportunity, and also an opportunity that we're capitalizing on to implement WaterWise in Western Weber. So those are some of the things that we're currently doing.
So are we redesigning the current code?
We could definitely make code amendments if there's recommendations from this body.
Well, my problem with the current code is, I mean, each entity might have something different than what the county puts out there now. And so if we're more stringent in what our rules are, as far as when you go back to that slide, is it 35% of turf grass and everything else?
Yeah.
If our district rules are more stringent to that, which one? Who's the regulator on that?
Oh, well, which prevails, right? Which gets.
Exactly. Which one's gonna go? I mean,
Both of them would be applicable, so they have to follow our rule and your rule, and by default, that would be more restricted, so that, obviously, they'd have to follow yours. They'd still be in compliance with ours, because we're putting a maximum limitation on that, you guys are putting a lower maximum limitation, so. They're gonna more than comply with ours and,
so like a commercial property, I'm just thinking out west where historically there hasn't been a lot of irrigation. And most of that's commercial. Can like West Warren Water have a more stringent landscaping plan to where they even go so much as no bushes, no landscaping? And then does that trump the county ordinance?
my understanding is it would, as a district, you guys have the, lawful ability to create ordinances that govern the use of your water. If you were a private water company, that might be a different story. But private water companies have a little bit of a different way of regulating, right? Because it's their water, or you were buying into their water, or you're part of a board, and so the board could set rules on how to use that. But as a district, you guys, I think, Doctor, you're trying to make sure I'm right on this. But I'm pretty confident you guys have the ability to adopt laws that have the same effect and the same weight of law as a county law would.
So then we just put it in our letter, our will serve letter. That's what we're requiring, or in our plan review, this is what we're requiring.
Yeah, and when we see that, in Wilson Brothers, we'll do our very best. We try very hard, sometimes we miss it, but to make sure that we make that be clear in the permit as well. That there's an ordinance that the district has adopted that we're gonna try and help enforce, so.
And I think the same thing goes for your rezones and development agreements as well, because as we start looking at this more on a site specific basis, whether we're gonna require secondary or if we're gonna move more to, limit the outdoor watering, but it's all gonna be provided by culinary and stuff like that. I think the entities need to be more involved in that development agreement review, because it's gonna change depending on the project, right? And our standards we might be more strict on something like that, because it's the whole purpose of what we're meeting around the table for today. We're coming up with a plan to make it more viable for a longer, and what we're doing now isn't gonna work forever in the future, so.
Yeah, I agree, even in those cases, it's good to get all the different voices together. Sometimes you don't know what water entity is gonna provide that service at the point of the development agreement. And that's okay too, say the county, let's just say there's a development agreement that was just passed the other day. That says that the developer agrees to use 50% of the water that Weaver Basin estimates a typical lot uses. And it says that they'll approve that by submitting architecture and landscape plans with each building permit. So we'll go and we'll check that, but if we've got a different rule that you guys have implemented that we know you've implemented, whether or not we enforce it, it's enforceable. And so if we know that, we're gonna make sure that the developer knows that your rule is actually as applicable as our rule, and so they need to follow the one that's more strict. That makes sense. So yeah, good communication, even if it doesn't get into the development agreement, or even if the county says, we usually don't do it in a permissive way. We usually don't say, we agree that you can use your water in any way that you want to, and we're never gonna let Taylor West Weaver regulate you. I don't think we even have the legislative authority to create a rule like that, because I think you guys have your.
Well, it'd fall back on us if they didn't follow the rules, they don't get the service, right?
Yeah,
But that's where the
Exactly.
cooperation's gotta take place, is we all wanna be on the same page here.
agreed.
Okay, yeah, so number one, I think there's, we've got plenty of good feedback. Moving on to number two, promote site-specific landscape design that decreases stormwater runoff or runoff use for irrigation. Any thoughts on some of that? Maybe some clever ways to maybe direct water so it doesn't end up into the ditches so quickly. You know, maybe ways to.
Well, that's gotta, I mean, I don't know how much that applies to us. That's gonna be, I feel, more on like county engineering to follow the LID practices and, you know, the county, I'm assuming, adopted an LID manual. Essentially, the state's put one out, and, you know, the developers have gotta essentially come up with a way to meet that. So I don't know, my opinion on number two, that's not something that's really affects us as water entities. Unless the landscape standard part of it comes in and, you know, do we only allow for drip irrigation in park strips and stuff, or so far away from a hard surface that can't be an overhead spray type thing, so it's not getting on that hard surface to make its way into a storm drain.
Mhm.
Oh, that's my thought on that
So
one.
it's a double-edged sword, because it gets into the pipe real quick, it's not subject to as much of that evaporation, then it gets to the river, and then it gets to the lake, so there's a little bit of a double-edged sword. We wanna make sure we're irrigating what needs to be irrigated, but also keeping water in the lake.
That's the problem with the LID manual.
Uh,
And there's one other thing for that, and that is people have rights to that runoff water too, further downstream. So not only to get it to the lake, but also to get it to those people that have rights to it, to use it.
Surface water rights are
Surface.
typically only if it's available.
But if it's not available, what good?
There's no water for them to take,
Right.
right? So if the source is eliminated upstream by some reason, that right's only theirs if it runs down the ditch at their point of diversion, right? I think so.
Are we doing any good putting in a bunch of detention ponds? Where we don't get it to the lake
No.
like we used to?
That's a tough one for me because my professional job is different, but no, detention ponds are not helping the situation.
Aggravated.
What did Dr. Aaron Rivers did a study on that? We lose 76% of water through evapotranspiration out of detention ponds, I believe. What actually makes it to the lakes, like 8, once you figure, you know, what the vegetation takes in.
Yeah, but it's also one of those things of too much of a good thing is a bad thing. When we need those detention ponds, right? They wouldn't be in
Well-
place. We had infrastructure size to handle that kind of capacity, right?
They need to be looked at as a flood control channel, not as a stormwater detention. So as soon as we get that through the state's head, we could maybe change something, but
It's always a challenge. Want it, you don't want it to move through, you don't want it.
30-40 years ago in a subdivision, we didn't have detention.
Couldn't agree more. And we hear about it all the time from developers. Why am I giving up this much ground to a detention basin? It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But
there's also gotta be a part of that too, is, you know, you look at us from a source perspective, right? A lot of us pull out of wells. You see all these agricultural fields irrigated, a lot of infiltration. What's that gonna do to the recharge of our aquifers in so many years? So that's another edge of that sword that you gotta play into, that, you know, that could have big impacts in the future if this does go away, you know. More conservation might hurt, the recharge of the aquifer.
A really big challenge in the Ogden Valley, on the east side of the valley. There was quite a bit of water coming through some of those private wells. And there's a lot of wells that go to that aquifer up there, a lot of straws. And there was a facility that I think they either lined or they piped their facility, and all of a sudden those wells started reducing the amount they were producing very quickly. So it just turned out that that irrigation facility was recharging those wells very quickly. Interesting problem to have.
And the other problem we have in our area is the salt content of the water. You're gonna start bringing salt up into a lot of this groundwater
Yeah,
if we're not keeping enough in to keep it pushed down.
the solution that the county is trying to help with in the Ogden Valley, which I don't think we're doing much to help them, but because they'll incorporate now, but is to do our best to ensure that we don't have too many straws going into that aquifer, which would mean a community-wide system. We did a study that showed how much that would cost for the community, and it was a big amount of money. I don't think there was ever any intention to set that money aside, and now that they're gonna be a state, they'll have to figure that out later, but if they don't figure something out, and they just keep punching straws at it, that's problematic. One of our, water code, part of the outcome of our water code, based on our wet water requirement is if you're putting a well in, you have to drill that well and you have to pump test it for 48 hours, prove that you've got enough water coming out. What developers do when they go to subdivide, they don't want to drill every single one of those wells. In fact, it's probably cheaper for a lot of them to just do a small community system than it is to do a whole bunch of wells. And so it's actually causing those systems to be more consolidated, so you don't have as many straws poking into an aquifer. So I don't know what the long-term solution is with the existing wells that are out there, but it may be something that closer to a larger pressurized system or something like that.
Okay. Let's see, going on to the next one, unless anyone else have any thoughts on the second one there? Okay. All right, so preservation and use of healthy trees that have a reasonable water requirement and are resistant to dry soil conditions. And so we actually have been working with an arborist that has given us a pretty substantial list of trees that are appropriate for this area. And I think we'll just use that list. And we do have an option for a developer to contract with an arborist that I think it's an arborist that the county chooses.
It's actually the county that will contract with them.
The county will contract, okay. Or we give a developer the option to do the trees themselves, so.
If they contract with the county relieves them of the escrow requirement, the financial requirement to install those trees. Basically, they just pay the county for the trees to be installed and we have our arborists go do it. But if they don't contract, then we hold an escrow and, they have to deal with us for 10 years that they're building that subdivision.
And I'm not familiar with, maybe some of you are, but with what type of trees you would grow out in some of these alkali areas.
Russian.
The noxious weeds or the noxious
Yeah.
trees that we don't want, but they're the only thing that grows.
Thanks so much for recommendations.
So the options are pretty slim on some of these areas.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 4, elimination of ponds, pools, and other features that promote unnecessary water evaporation.
That would be all the retention ponds that don't have anything in the bottom to keep the water there. So they have been not the best idea, I don't think.
I don't know how you could regulate until someone can have a
Yeah.
cycle somewhat.
Well,
So we have not encouraged.
Covers us. Yeah, that's what I
That's good.
We have not encouraged retention ponds in the time I've been here in the last 8 years. We have done everything we can to discourage those. We have encouraged detention ponds. And those do discharge it. But we have done everything we can to discourage retention. I can't speak for the past, only speak forward.
Retention don't work in the western part of the county, our groundwater's too high.
Doesn't hurt.
But I think what you're talking
Right.
about is ponds for secondary irrigation.
Secondary usage.
Oh,
Oh,
Yes.
I misunderstood you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Well, and you gotta be careful with that with Army Corps of Engineers, cause they, I mean,
all of a sudden it's wetland.
yeah, you know, so.
So maybe helping, trying to find ways to help facilitate infrastructure that doesn't have outdoor detention facilities. Especially not unlined outdoor detention facilities.
Mhm.
Do we have someone here from Hooper?
Can't say anybody.
Been hoping to ask a question of various different secondary water shareholders, and I think Hooper would be a good one to ask the question to, but what kind of coordination can the secondary companies have with the primary company on the possibility of holding water in a tank somewhere, for example? Maybe it's maybe Taylor West Weaver needs a new tank, and maybe that tank is 25% or twice big, whatever. What would be the challenge in creating a relationship where some of that water, it's all treated, but some of that water would be held for irrigation purposes within maybe Taylor West Weaver or Warren West Lawrence system?
I think your delivery system is gonna be your biggest challenge.
We have to have so much for fire protection per household. So. You know, if we use that all up at night and we had a fire in the middle of the night and that reservoir is drained, then we're kind of in trouble with fire protection.
Yeah.
Unless we really oversize what yeah, it'd have to be a really big.
So no matter what's the massive cost, you're gonna upgrade your lines, your current lines, or you're gonna install secondary lines.
Yeah.
What's your intent, Sean? Is it integration of one system, one
Yeah.
delivery system?
So a lot of the challenge we have with unpressurized is, you got the issue with headwater. And as headwater changes or flips over to development, then you got less and less and less time goes on, and all we're seeing is farms developing. We're not seeing developments turn into farms, so we know it's going in one direction. A solution is gonna have to be found, but we also, I think collectively, don't wanna be overbearing on different water right holders. How do we find ways for them to have mutual gain with other existing water companies? I mean, it'd be nice if everybody just said, here, let's put all our water in a bucket and let's share it. But that's obviously not how water works, and that's definitely not how people they wanna protect their water, right? So how do we help them put it all in a bucket, but have all of the legal rights and the ability to access flow and I don't know, all that, for the long-term goal being a pressurized system that's valley-wide, well, West Weaver-wide.
Well, maybe part of that is that part of their business needs to become a district. Or integrated into a district.
I agree with that, but the problem, I think, when you're starting to mix the two districts is where you're gonna run into a challenge.
Right, that's it. It's not a real good mixture.
Well, and it'd almost, to go from surface to ground, like if. We'd have to take it out of the ground and pump it, so we lose half of it, but if it went if we treated it directly from surface, then. We'd have to put it in a treatment plant to treat it, then to put it in our system.
Yeah.
So.
You guys don't have a treatment facility, you've
Or,
told you could,
you know,
that's right, you guys get directly.
we contract with them to treat any surface water we use.
Get into questions about there's the point of diversion and. So we to pick some of those up and put them into the Weaver Basin system and have Weaver Basin fill those tanks up for everybody and. You guys just need distribution.
Well, kind of what we do now, just without the irrigation component in it.
That's the easy way to do it. The problem is keeping the head pressure on the canals so that they still work.
If, what I'm thinking, and I don't know if this is the right thing, if this works long term, everything's pressurized. So the farmer has access to his water through a pressurized system. as opposed to through a canal system, then your headwater issue is the problem anymore.
I don't know if a
True, that's a hard sell.
I don't know if a drink, if,
Yeah.
you know, a drinking water entity would wanna put in the size of infrastructure it would take to maintain an agricultural size operation, you know, as far as pressure and flow goes.
And then you've got to incentivize a farmer to want to switch and spend a lot of capital to go from a gravity system that's been around for 150 years.
Yeah, one thing we thought about is our current general plan says something to the extent of encourage gravity systems to be pressurized. Doesn't say how. Maybe something we can do with our general plan now is look into funding sources that might be available, maybe the Department of Ag or whatever. I know the Department of Water Resources, they've got both low interest loan programs as well as grant programs that they can tap into. So maybe there's just ways that we can
I have
some those together.
with, I know the irrigation companies are worried about not having enough water to go down the ditch. But if a culinary entity only needs 0.3 of an acre foot and 0.7 is still in the ditch. So, you know, you take 0.3 and have it treated and the 0.7 is still in the ditch, how are they losing? They're actually gaining water. So I don't understand why the irrigation companies are so afraid of letting a third of that acre foot go to treatment. One day it's gonna have to happen because like the last meeting we had, there's 10,000 acre feet left, 28,000 homes. When that's gone, the irrigation company's either gonna have to say, okay, we're gonna let a third of that go, or we're not gonna let a third of it go, and we're just gonna keep farming and we're not gonna let our kids live anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Free market answer is let the price go up as high as it possibly can until it really convinces someone to do something different.
but
I don't know if that's the right answer.
I don't think they should be worried about, because they're actually gonna gain water. We're only taking for one unit 0.3 of an acre foot off of, you know. But am I thinking silly or? You guys are the pros. What's your thoughts on that?
Makes sense. Well, first thought, step back a little bit, is it's really problematic when you try to combine residential secondary irrigation with farm, with agriculture. The ags are always gonna outdraw the secondary systems, which means the pressure fluctuation for the secondary just doesn't work. And so we've tried to keep those as separate as possible. We've got some small areas that we still serve some ag, but we limit them on the flow rate that we'll deliver. And so they have to spend a lot more time getting across the field.
Is that what you guys do?
How does Layton City do it, Scott?
So
'Cause
Layton,
I've heard that that's the way they do it.
yeah, they have a flood irrigation segment of their system that comes off the Davidson Weaver Canal.
Uh-huh.
And so those sections are still flood, but they. You know exactly.
When they build the subdivision, though, what do they do? Do they transfer a third of that to you guys to treat? Or do they,
No.
they keep that in there?
Yeah, everything that. It's really complicated because we have trilateral agreements that allow for a portion of the shares to go back to the city. Those shares can be transferred to us
Right.
for treatment.
Yeah.
The shares that go for outdoor irrigation, whether it's whatever, secondary or ag, stay with the irrigation company and they deliver those shares.
So that's kind of working how I'm explaining now, where right now, like Hooper irrigation. It stays there.
But it's still taking something out of the ag. It's still taking something out of the ditch. Yes, they still have sufficient left for the most part, but they're still losing a portion.
Yeah, so there sounds like the combining systems and kind of combine resources probably isn't the
It
very.
just depends on how much you're trying to push through the ag system. It's. Because they expect to get through their system in a reasonable time. And it's really tough when you're trying to maintain pressure in the whole system.
West Weaver serves a handful of ag operations. What do you guys do? Or do you restrict their flow or how does that work?
None of the ag operations use it for like irrigating of fields and stuff. I mean, ag operations are gonna use it to rinse dairy barns, water cows, stuff
Gotcha.
like that.
Gotcha.
It doesn't supply for irrigation purposes.
Makes sense.
I think when Weaver Basin can't distribute any more culinary water, that's when they can't treat anymore, then I think the irrigation companies are gonna have to make a decision what they want to do.
Well, to be fair, I mean, there's statute that's written right now that dictates how shareholders can approach an irrigation company and move water out of the irrigation company and into a different use that accounts for carry water. I think the only thing the statute says right now is there has to be a process that's defined in their bylaws that kind of structures how this would happen. And so
Can't be unreasonably.
it can't be
withheld.
unreasonably withheld, which is a subjective term, right? I mean, we see those same thing, reasonable water requirements. I don't know what that means. But to the point of like, is it going to happen? I think the fact that there's statute that's written that dictates how that shareholder change application should be approached means that there is an expectation that there is discussion and collaboration taking place. The 37, and most of the time I'm reading bylaws, it's more of an expectation that 20% remains in the irrigation company, the balance can be taken out under a change application at the state level.
20% volume, total volume.
Yeah, stays in the irrigation.
And is that assuming that 20% gets it to the very end of the line?
Well, so once again, every irrigation company can structure it the way that they think their system operates. Generally, what I've seen is a 20%. That's not consistent, that's not what everybody's doing, but that's the premise is they can dictate it. If they think reasonable is 30% stays in their irrigation company and 70% use it. 20/80 or whatever it looks like, there's a process in place that facilitates that process.
So a shareholder still has rights.
The shareholder has rights to approach the irrigation company with a request to move their share out of the irrigation company as long, but they have to follow the process that's defined in the irrigation company's bylaws.
Well, the irrigation company can't just say, you
Yeah,
can't.
can't do it.
Yeah, I think the terminology discussed when I think is it can't unreasonably be withheld. Now, we all know that means that there's a process in place, and if somebody feels like it's being unreasonably withheld, go to court. Then you go to court, so it's subject.
We've got to keep those attorneys employed.
Not enough of them.
Great, well, thank you guys.
That's good information to, I think did you send me that?
I don't know if I
Yes,
did.
but
I got a lot of things I'd like to do. If I haven't, let me know and I'll send it over.
Excellent. Okay, reduction of yard waste. Now, I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking, how does this relate to water conservation?
Is this waste, like wasting water, or is it?
Maybe that's what it's referring to,
But if you
maybe.
don't water your yard, you don't have any waste, so that's good.
Fixed it.
Yeah.
I have something short about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all pretty well versed in some of the ways that we can avoid just water spilling over the curb and down the drain, you know, it's kind of sad to see, but we see it everywhere. Okay, going on to number 6. Creating a water budget associated with a particular type of development.
That goes back to the conversation we had with development agreements and when the rezone comes through, you're gonna look at that. What the development impacts are, what their styles are, the area it's in, you know, like we've talked in previous meetings, historically being irrigated or not. I think that where that's gonna come into play, would be tied into that.
Okay.
Who bears that burden?
I think it's gotta be a cooperation between the developer, the county and the water supplier.
Negotiation. Absolutely.
That would warrant putting a process and a policy. At least from the county's perspective.
Does that give the water companies a seat at the planning commission table, or where do they chime in their opinion on that?
I think in the development review process,
I guess the will serve.
Yeah, will serve.
The will, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on how we do structure that. If it's through the development agreement process, we're gonna wanna pin down who the provider is. Normally we could do that. Sometimes we can't, but if it's just part of a code, I mean, that might be an easier way to do it, because then by default, the administrative application of the code would then apply.
well, I think from the culinary side, and that's in my opinion where it starts. Is that's gonna be pretty easy to pin down. There's only a few providers and we all have service areas. In the western part of the county for this part of the general plan, right?
Correct.
You got Uinta Highlands, you got Bonta Vista, Taylor West Weaver, Hooper, Warren West Warren. I mean, those are pretty well. That whole area in the western, in the western Weaver general plan area is all locked in by that. I think you start there, then the secondary provider comes in. Behind that, if there is a secondary provider.
Yeah.
Cause the direction we're going, there's gonna be some of these developments that don't have secondary and it's all, essentially provided by primary water.
Yeah.
But I think what we've got to do is have the developer landscape the yard the way it needs to be done from the get-go.
Yeah, I agree.
Or before Taylor West Weaver gives occupancy approval, that yard would have to be landscaped according to what the agreement was.
Do you guys sign up on building permit occupancies?
Yeah, the county does a really good job of
Making sure you guys,
making
okay,
sure that,
you guys have inspectors?
yeah.
I would love to get our building inspectors to do things that are outside the IBC or IRC. It's really challenging to get them to look outside of those codes, but. I mean, even things like, we're implementing dark sky, regulations, as development comes out west and. Right now, for us to verify whether or not they're putting in the right lighting devices on the outside of the house. We have to go out there after the building inspector's done to verify that the right lighting devices are there, when. It should be a lot easier to be able to consolidate those resources, so we're trying to kind of fix that silo that we have internally.
You want our inspector to check that out too?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, you can put together contracts. But maybe that's a function of the inspector. I don't wanna put more on them. Getting them warmed up to dark sky, compliance is hard enough. I don't wanna put too much
It's
more.
basically just through Frontier, you have a review, we have final review. On your check boxes through Frontier and.
Oh, good.
And the developer calls us for a final inspection, we check the box and then they can.
So one thing to consider, because I love the accountability enforcement aspect of the discussion. I don't think it's as simple as maybe it's been presented in the past, not in this room, but just in other conversations. Occupancy, I don't know what the percentage of homes that are being completed in the winter months are. But I mean, that could be a challenge if occupancy is not being granted and no landscapes are installed.
Yeah.
We solved that by doing like temp COs.
There you go.
So we'll do a temp CO, and normally if it's financed by a bank. Normally the bank will be very good at making sure that they come back at some point and say, hey, did this ever get final?
Nice.
That's only after the market collapse of 2008. That's when they started actually checking. So I can't guarantee they'll always do that in the future.
Yeah, but I know that's just something we've.
Well, and if it's mostly, if we're looking at the dryscape area. If they have the dryscape
That's
area
true,
done.
yeah,
And
they
then-
could have the irrigation and things like that would
Yeah.
substantiate that.
You go out there and the house is built, but the yard is just dirt and they say dryscape. Do you say, okay? I mean,
Well, that's why the development agreement would have to have all that in,
You would have to have a plan, right?
Something to enforce.
and that's gonna be the hard part on our side as well, is gonna be the enforcement. We could check it through the permitting process. But getting enough people to get out there and verify that it's been done the way the plan shows, or at least in compliance with the law. Is a resource challenge that we haven't figured out how to solve yet. We're gonna have to solve it, but we have to figure it out yet.
I think it's gonna have to have participation with the developer, Yeah, they're gonna wanna have to do, they're gonna wanna have to participate in something like that.
We're getting some pretty good developers, who want to landscape the yards as a sales pitch to bring people in, so that's been really nice. Not all developers do that. Especially the ones who aren't quite as big. So, a little bit of a challenge there.
Well, they gotta start getting on board.
Partial.
Yeah, front yard.
Very rare to get one full,
Yeah.
full, you'll see a front yards, you'll see the allotment offer so much soft, but you don't see full lawn landscaping.
Yeah.
You know, installations on single dwelling, obviously on multifamily. Yeah, they're gonna install the entire thing there, but single family, rarely are they gonna do the whole thing, you're gonna do a front yard,
Good.
yeah, just very.
Well, and if you're doing a dry scape, I think you're gonna wanna have very small lots, like quarter acre lots or something.
Yeah. Lot sizes make all the difference in the road on.
If it's a subdivision that wants anything above a quarter acre lot, then they're gonna have to have pressurized irrigation system. It would be my
Yes.
thinking, but
We can allow. Yes.
yeah, which, takes a lot of water.
Great.
Yeah, with these smaller lot sizes, the landscaping should be more easy to get as part of the whole thing. Get the developers involved in landscaping the whole thing.
What's your thoughts, Jeff? You're a developer.
Well, we're kind of wasted on a lot of things right now. Cause we got different places that are, like the county has allowed hookups where they, have had the permits. But didn't have the secondary, then they hooked to the secondary and didn't notify us. And then we've got some cities that are actually developing large lots. And then reducing the amount of water that they're allowed to use, which makes acre lots, junkyards, dust bowls and stuff like that, so we're trying to decide which is the best way to go. And if they supply the water that they need for the lot, then we can provide it. But sometimes the cities aren't totally cooperating with this program of conserving water.
What about in areas that haven't historically been watered? Do we develop those or do we leave them dust bowls, and how do we provide water
Well, that's the problem,
for them?
because the county has lots of areas where there isn't pressurized secondary, lots of areas. And yet they are developing. So are they using Warren, West Warren, are you using Taylor, West Weaver, are they using culinary water to water? Because, there's lots of areas that don't have pressurized secondary.
I think more so on that, there's a lot of areas that haven't historically been flood irrigated, and that's kind of where it starts from.
So the flood irrigation is gonna be non-existent on any subdivision, because you don't have the distribution.
No, I get that, but
System.
the ground doesn't have water with it, so they don't have that water to come to the table with,
Well, then they don't develop.
so.
That's what
Yeah,
they've been forced to do.
That's what,
Yeah,
up
just
to
don't
this
develop.
point, but we're
Yeah.
looking at, maybe look more like St. George. So like Swans, by me, hasn't historically been watered. Do we develop some of that property and do more dry scape? Or do we just say, no, you can't build on any of that unless you do have secondary water?
Or they present a landscape plan that that's dryscape.
Yeah, that's what.
And do you deny them from building if they provide a plan for dryscape? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Or do you allow them, and then in the DA, you decide whether or not. And then that has to stay with that development,
Right.
and stays with the lot. And so that the new owner down the road, when it sells, doesn't expect they're gonna be watering it and use culinary to do it.
We do the landscape.
See, so
That's what's going on right now,
Back to
it's
the
like you're saying,
enforcement side.
people are hooking up to culinary afterwards, right? So you don't have secondary water.
Yeah.
We have an example, I won't say which one, I think everyone out there will know which one, but it was told they had secondary water, everybody was told they had secondary water. Turns out they can't deliver that secondary water, and so what does everybody do? They hook up to the culinary water.
And that's what's happening, that's what I was saying about that. So,
But
so
if-
that
if
creates
that-
the problem now.
If that developer was forced to landscape it as dryscape to begin with, would it have been a different situation?
Because of,
You know,
No, and that's what that's on ground that was unconditionally watered too, so it should have been It should have been zero skate throughout.
But then you get into deep restrictions,
What-
which the county's willing to do, but
Who enforces it?
What they should be forced to do in a circumstance like that is give up that water. And the point of diversion should be changed and given to the water district
Absolutely.
so that they can supply it.
I agree with that.
It should be forced, no questions asked. It doesn't stay with the canal company, it's forced out of there and it's supplied back.
we're talking about this with some of our state representatives right now to look at making some of those changes on the state level as it relates to water rights and development and force and, you know, being able to force that water into a more public system instead of it just sitting with the land.
Yeah.
Once again, if there's so many, there's not enough storage. So, you know, right now in the beginning, so coming people hook onto the culinary water, we're not noticing a big difference, but as we start building out, you start having all these people hooking onto the culinary water because we don't have storage, we don't have any secondary, you know, that's the issue. We can't be setting the precedent now that we're setting with just hook onto the culinary water.
But you're just changing the point of diversion.
Yeah.
You're moving it up so that it comes through Weaver Basin.
Yeah.
As treated water.
Yeah.
So what the county does during the development process, our code requires us to have that will serve letter. And the code requires will serve letters to say specific things. Sometimes they don't say that thing. But we assume they know what the law is and that they're following the law when they do issue those will serve letters. And it basically says that we agree that this developer has sufficient water for all proposed water uses. Fire suppression, indoor, outdoor, whatever it is. So if outdoor is not gonna be allowed, we expect that water company to tell us no outdoor, so, and they need to find a secondary system, otherwise they don't get our service. And be able to tell us that they've got enough fire flow for that subdivision too. We don't always get from, for all of our developments, countywide, Ogden Valley as well, the same letter written to say that we have enough water for all of those specific uses.
But the problem with that process is, Charlie, that should take place when a rezone comes to the table. Right now, at a rezone, you only ask for an availability letter.
And all of those factors you're talking about need to come to play when they're coming in and asking to change the amount of lots and everything they're bringing in. Right now, there's not a requirement for a secondary system to come into play at the rezone level.
Yeah.
And say, speaking as Taylor West Weaver, we could give you an availability. If you're in our district and we have available water, yeah, but we don't know what water you're gonna demand or take.
For second or for
Both. So we don't put any of those. Yeah, you get a letter for a rezone that says, yeah, they're in our district.
get it, yeah, we know that they're.
But
we know they're coming.
the problem with that is, a lot of times with the rezone, you know kind of an idea of how many lots are coming and what things you're gonna look at. That's why that will serve letter should be in there at the rezone prior to, because we maybe could only have water enough to serve half of it.
What happens if the developer comes to the table? You guys don't have enough water, but they have the ability to prove up water for you. But they're not gonna spend money to do any of that until after they know the county's gonna approve the density or the rights or whatever.
Well, that's where this discussion's gotta take place, right? They've gotta come to that, when it's through that process, that's why the water entities need to be involved with that. Because that's when it's gonna come in, and then that's when they can start looking at the point.
All right,
You know, what type of development is this? Is it something that's gonna be supplied 100% by culinary? Because it's never been, historically watered,
Yeah.
with a stricter restriction, is there gonna be a secondary water company come into play? That's where that conversation needs to happen at the rezone level.
it's kind of like what we're doing with the park district, just slightly different, right? We're asking for donations through the rezone level. But also, Warren West Warren, they're putting together contracts with these big entities saying, how are you gonna help us out? And we wanna memorialize that by contract before we tell the county that we're comfortable with this.
And Charlie, it's not just about parks and water, it's about sewer. And right now, in our West River corridor, we are super challenged with electricity, and I don't know if y'all are aware of that. Yeah. But that has become a way worse and bigger concern than water right now. And that's saying a lot, because water is a huge concern.
Yeah.
So we've got these developers coming to us on a daily and a weekly basis. And they are expecting us to solve these problems for properties that they purchase without utilities and without infrastructure. So the main thing that I get up with is public infrastructure districts. We're happy to do, but we need to know that we have the ability before we even start going down that direction. And so what happens is it just becomes this cycle of, okay, the developer's going to West Warren Water, they're going to, I don't want to say sewer. They're shopping to see where they can get the will serve, then they're going to the commission, and they're going to staff, and then they're trying to cobble all of this together to get to through the planning commission, and it's being done backwards.
I agree 100%.
Right. Huge waste of staff time and taxpayer dollars, and it needs to stop.
The only rub, the rub that I have with that is, and maybe some of our developers in the room can help us enlighten us. When you're looking to flip a piece of property, you've got to know you've got the security to flip it, right? So you have to know that the community is going to actually give you the rights if you don't have the rights on the front end. So to ask a developer to prove up access to water, to prove up access to sewer, to prove up access to power before the county commissioners have said, we agree that you can actually develop this property this way. There's no motivation for a developer to want to do that. So how do you create the motivation to allow a developer to have good ideas, to be innovative, to bring something cool, as long as
So
they bring all that?
I think
those facilities.
we're talking mainly about housing developers, but I deal with industrial and commercial developers, and we do that before they even go. And that's part of the economic development process for large industrial development is the site selection.
Mhm.
Site selection is a huge thing. I just got off the phone before I came down here with site selection. And the first thing I said to them is, do not make an option on that property until you can tell me that we can satisfy your utility needs and your zoning needs.
I agree 100%. The zoning,
Housing development, just
I think we've said that a few times.
to support very large development projects, and it needs to start being looked at as if we're doing large economic development.
Absolutely.
There's no difference at the same
It's
time.
bigger all the time, the developments.
Absolutely agree, and it's the same taxing, it's the same ask that we're asking from our utilities at this point with the housing as it is with our economic development or large industrial development.
So I have a question, hold on a question, but I think a lot of, and maybe the developers that we're dealing with now are a little more knowledgeable, but in the past, it seems like they don't know the difference between an availability letter and a will serve letter.
Right.
And they get that availability and they run in to the county, and as you all know, saying they've got everything they need. And so I don't know if.
That's what we hear all the time, fully approved.
And that's what we hear, yeah.
We had a line presented to us this week that was fully approved,
Yeah.
and I was like, by who?
Oh, I get calls from the state on behalf of LMSA that they have went to the state and said, well, we got an availability letter from LMSA. We're gonna submit our plans for our sewer structure.
Yes.
When nothing has even gone through us or the county.
Right, so
That
is there,
happens on a
yeah, so is there a way you can combine the availability and the will, I mean. I don't know, because I think there's been a lot of confusion between the two.
I think the availability letter needs to go away and the will serve needs to come into play at the rezone level.
Not offered availability letters, we only offer will serve, and you have to come in and meet that criteria for the will serve, and that's it.
Yeah, so we're gonna save a lot of paper if we do that.
Well, but the county's gotta change ordinance though, because technically by ordinance, they only have to have an availability letter,
You
right?
don't have to. No.
They did that.
The county can require availability letter at any point in the process, but there's no,
There's no code.
there's no, right, so basically the code says. If the county requires it at any point, you need to provide an availability letter.
But we need to change the code.
It's acknowledgement letter.
Yeah.
Let me.
But before you were rezoning, or a few years back, you weren't requiring availability to rezone it. It was just happening without our involvement.
Reason, yep.
But at least now it's happening with our involvement. I don't know.
Right, it's getting, I mean,
It's getting better.
We're getting better, but we're not there yet.
not there yet, not totally.
So one thing though, when we did the water, redid the water code about 5 years, 6 years ago or so. we created a availability to serve form. And we were hoping that we could get all the water companies, entities on board to use the same form, whether it's the secondary or the culinary water company. That way, we're all speaking the same language when we're making those commitments. Is that something you guys would be interested in?
I didn't know that form
doing?
existed.
Just standardizing the form, the communication, standardizing the terminology.
I love that.
Well, it might help.
I love that.
At
I
least
didn't even know there was a form, Charlie.
Was that?
I didn't even know there was a form.
Well, so we didn't, we sent it to a couple of different places to get, their take on it. I don't know if we did Western Weaver at all, it might have just been Ogden Valley, but, because Ogden Valley is a much bigger problem.
Oh, yeah.
All the different entities that are right there.
Well, I think that's what the problems that we're heading towards, we say number 4 is elimination of ponds. So I'm just gonna talk for our area right here, so when people wanna develop, there is no secondary system, so what are they gonna do? They're gonna create a pond for the delivery, and so it's, you know, that's the.
But the good part of the county code is that puts it back on the water supplier to say yes or no. The culinary provider has to sign off and agree to that private system before they'll give it to
That's
them.
putting a lot of burden on them, that's the problem that we're having out there, is they're saying, who enforces these? Are they gonna use their time and, you know, and their efforts to go, and who's running that pond? Is it forced? It should be, there should be a governing, singular, so we don't have the issue that we have in the valley where there's 100 companies that you're dealing with. We need kind of a singular source, and I don't think that they want to be the ones that
Well,
are
they
facing
don't.
that.
We don't want to be it. We fought against it when they put it in the code that way, but we didn't win.
And it get a lot more expensive for people to build, because my understanding is the board out there they have to be concrete or lined.
Smart.
And pressurized. So it's gonna they're gonna need, what is it, 3-phase electricity, and they're gonna have to line them, and it's gonna cost a lot of money, so I don't know.
I mean, what Taylor West Weaver did to offset that, our development review fee went to $200 a lot. Because we've got to recoup that cost to not only approve and look at a pressure or a pressurized secondary, but also the culinary system.
Well, if it's a irrigation system, it's higher than that.
Yeah,
And so.
if they're bringing a private system.
In the last meetings, we've talked about, well, specifically probably for the 14,000 front doors that are gonna be, is it Westbridge?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about them actually putting it in the personal deeds to the land, that they can only, have so much footage of yard or watered area.
Yeah.
Did we ever find out, is that something legal to be done? Can the developer do that?
Yeah, it's actually gonna be in the development agreement, and they're committing to xeriscaping. So, that doesn't mean there's not gonna be any turf anywhere.
Right.
But they'll have very limited turf, and most of it's just gonna be drip irrigation. They committed to that, so it's not even a deed restriction. It actually will run with each lot, 'cause it's gonna be recorded to the entire property. So if you were to pull title on any one of those, you'll find the development agreement in the bill.
And it'll be in the deeds, so that there'll be some repercussion if,
Yeah, and that gets passed on, thousand.
right, it is gotta go into perpetuity.
Yeah. And some of these restrictions are not in perpetuity, they have. On it, but.
That's the
You'll-
development.
This particular one. I think
They'll have to do that.
Yeah.
Far too
Yeah.
dedicated.
Oh, and that is really disappointing. Even this development agreement has a 30-year expiration period. And so even after that, there still needs to be
There's still
something in
some
place to make sure people aren't flipping their
HOA or whatever.
flip their strip back to the.
Yes.
Right.
Parks will be.
Westbridge is a really good example though of infrastructure challenges. Nobody would have even dreamed, nobody would have dreamed of trying to develop that if we said you can't develop it when you move up water.
That's right, because there is none.
Right, but what they've said is, we can get a huge economy of scale out of this and very likely build you a package treatment facility and very likely build you a brand new water facility out here. If we know we have that economy of scale, they wouldn't even come and ask the question if we had told them that they need to get a will serve order first. So that's the challenge that we have is, if we do that, we cut off the innovation that developers who are willing to spend money can have. It is hard because sometimes you get developers who aren't willing to spend money taking advantage of that.
Well, I don't know.
But we always catch it at subdivision.
So the developers that wanna bring water in, they purchase shares or they purchase water rights, they wanna bring it in to satisfy their development. It all depends on the type of water, whether it's actually usable by the water entities. Or capturable by the water entities, so that's gotta be thought through very carefully.
Distributed to
Yeah,
it
I'm
too.
interested to see where for their parks, and they're gonna have to have, you're not gonna have 14,000 homes put in there with no green space at all, right? There's gonna be parks, there's gotta be.
Sure.
400 acres.
So, we're, 400 acres of water where there's currently zero water.
Yep.
That'll be interesting to see where they.
Well, good.
Where they
Look at
thrive
it,
at the top
look at it, look at it this way. If they can buy those shares to provide that water,
Yeah.
whether it's river right or water shares, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Okay, that means somebody's out there willing to sell those. And those might be connected, so to speak, to property right now, that water's being physically used on. Well, in the future, that might be the dry piece of property that can't get developed or has a harder time being developed. It's like, you know, I think we've forgotten about the financial and outside economic part of this equation.
Right, yep.
The money is going to settle this thing out in the end. What do we say? Water flows to? Money, there you go.
More gravity.
Now, but
More so money.
in the end story is we know that there's a finite amount. So the finite amount is going to dictate how much water there is. It's not gonna say where it goes.
Yeah.
So that thing kind of solves itself in my mind just in pure economics.
And yeah, going back, I think one of the first things I said in the first meeting, is I don't think we have a water problem. I think we have a water access problem. I think we need to know how to get to the water that does exist, whether it's in this area or way, way outside this area. I mean, we look at all those other desert communities that are going hundreds of miles, thousands of miles in some cases, trying to figure out how to get to those water sources. Maybe thousands is an over exaggeration, but hundreds at the very least. Trying to figure out how to get to water sources and trying to buy water sources. I was in the Snake Valley, not too long ago, that big Snake Valley default that happened 10 years ago. Or Las Vegas Water Improvement District or whatever it is, where Clark County wanted to essentially drain the aquifer. I mean, that was the fear from locals. And you had Native American reservations there, you had farmers, you had folks who, in an area that has a fairly good aquifer pool, but is very dry on top. People very concerned and having senior water rights and all that, how do we make sure that Las Vegas doesn't steal our water? Now, my understanding is that there's not a pipe going to that valley, so somehow, Las Vegas has figured something else out. But that's a very real outcome that I think we're gonna have to think about, and it's gonna be, like I say, it's just gonna be about money. At what point are we all having to ante up, or at what point is the developer having to ante up to make sure that growth can happen in a well-planned and well-thought.
But the standards discussed here and established as being the development route help to ensure that at least the developed water supply that we have right now is extended as far as possible.
Yes. Yeah, and that's important.
And
As
the-
far and as long.
And the other piece to this is, we wanna make sure that as we're developing out, we're not just taking into consideration the here and the now, but the long-term sustainability of these development projects that are being put in. So ultimately, the goal of that whole unincorporated West Weaver County is to become an incorporated city. We don't want a piecemealed hodgepodge infrastructure area out there. We wanna do it right the first time. And that's why we've kind of gotten so strict about our development practices, is because we don't wanna see individual developers come in and just create their own systems and then try to tie it into a big system that's just gonna get ripped out
Yep.
in the next 10 years.
And it's unfortunate the way the law works, because the law
The law.
says that we can't require anything more than their exact info. Well, it says rough proportionality, but all the attorneys are saying no.
Yeah.
This doesn't apply to them. This bigger pipe that you need to actually make sure that good development practices actually happen. You cannot make your developers pay for that. And so, yeah, how do we make sure that we get that 15-inch pipe or 16-inch pipe when that developer only needs an 8-inch? And we talk about impact fees, we talk about a lot of different ways to try and fund it.
Public infrastructure districts, about partnership. Purgatory, we're able to, because we come in as the finance mechanism, we're able to say, yeah, we'll partner with you, but it's gonna look like this.
Yeah.
And that's really, at this point in time, our only leverage we have as a county is to make sure that as these projects are coming to our attention, that we're partnering with them to make sure the infrastructure is the right size.
Developers cry and cry and cry. No offense to our development friends in the room, about having to do anything extra. The luck that we have in Western Weber, is we've got a lot of ag land that could be flipped to residential. And so there's a huge motivator. But they kick and scream the whole way whenever we ask for something a little bit bigger than they would have otherwise had to do. But we can get it through the rezone process. We're trying.
Right, well, we're pretty much over time a little bit, but very good discussion, very good information that we'll definitely take. And so, like I mentioned, feel free to send us any other material that you have. And I'm curious what you guys think about having one more meeting or calling this our final meeting. Do you feel like we've covered those topics sufficiently? Or do you think there's room for one more?
I think my opinion would be, let's let the county put something together and then bring this group back together once you have a draft. And then we have something to discuss, right?
Great.
I mean, there's been a lot of great discussion in all our meetings, but we all end up at the same point. Kind of in these, so let's see a proposal,
Got it.
let us weigh in on that proposal and then see where it goes from there.
Do you want to weigh in on a proposal together in a meeting, or would you rather do that over email? I don't want to have a meeting that could be an email, but I don't want to have an email that could be a meeting.
I say in person, you're gonna have a lot better discussion.
Yeah, I think so too.
And you can
Bring it out early.
put the draft out
Yes.
and put the draft
In
out
advance,
in advance, yeah.
Just like I
So
said,
just to tell you on the development, let us see it before so we can come prepared.
yeah.
Great.
Otherwise, then it's a pointless meeting because you're looking at it as you go through it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
Y'all really read it.
Yes, I did. Not everybody did.
I can verify that Brent did.
Cause when I didn't like something, I called Charlie.
Okay. Well, you guys, you have a great 24th and stay cool out there. Grab a drink of water or a snack on the way out, please.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See ya.